Hey there, it's Andrea, and welcome to the Voice of Influence podcast. Today, I have with me Peggy Sullivan. Peggy is a renowned keynote speaker, author, and researcher whose viral TEDx talk with millions of views has inspired audiences worldwide to overcome busyness and achieve peak performance without sacrificing well being. Through her signature busy busting framework, trusted by Fortune 500 companies like Google, Bank of America, and Blue Cross Blue Shield, she reveals how packed schedules can reduce productivity and fulfillment. Peggy, it's great to see you and welcome to the Voice of Influence
Yeah,
podcast.
it's great to see you. Sorry, that was a mouthful. I'll have to work on that. But yeah, I'm thrilled to be here.
Well, it's helpful for us all to kind of get a sense of who you are and what your background is.
Yeah, I mean, my name is Peggy, and I am a busyness addict, and I have had lots of wake-up calls, and I proceeded in my life as though busy is better. But I had one particular wake-up call, and I did a lot of market research that made me realize that when we're really over the top busy, that we get into this mindless haze. For me, it was I just came home from work after an 11-hour day, and I was exhausted and hungry. So I looked in the cupboard to find anything I could to eat, and I landed on a bag of stale pistachio nuts, and I chomped them down. And next thing I know, I felt this like pulling on my leg, and I looked down, and it was my cat Dazzle throwing up pistachio nuts, and I realized that I had switched his kibbles because he was asking to eat with the pistachio nuts in both hands, and I accidentally ate pet food for dinner. And
Ooh.
I had this big aha moment. Like, I remember actually chewing the pet food and thinking to myself, these nuts are salty. They're stale. They don't taste right. But I just kept on doing because I was in such a mindless haze. So for me, really doing the market research that I've done to understand that busy isn't better, busyness doesn't equate to success. Busyness is actually a thief that sabotages our human potential. And, when I got all of those aha moments, I really started to live. And I started really stepping into my power in terms of my thought leadership, in terms of my book, my speech, everything in life, my relationships, everything just got better because I just decided that I wasn't gonna, continue this 24/7 hustle because it wasn't making me better.
Oh yeah. What did that 24/7 hustle, what did that actually look like for you at that time?
Yeah, I mean, every day was different. I can, remember I used to travel for work. So many times I used a post-it note to remind myself what time zone I'm in. And when I'm moving to the airport to go to another city and another time zone, because I did a lot of international travel. When I wasn't traveling, it meant I'd get up super early in the morning so I could get a gym workout in, get to work by 7:30, 8 o'clock, many times work till 7, 8 at night, come home. And when I was married, before my husband was like, hey, after 20 years, I'm not spending time with you. Our relationship has really fallen apart and I want out. And it made me realize that I wasn't making time or room in my life for my relationships. My son was too young, so he didn't necessarily remember or know, but I missed a lot of those magical moments. And so it just was hustle 24/7. Weekends, I took care of my parents who were ill. It was truly the sandwich generation.
Yeah. Yeah, I get that. Yeah. What do you think kept you in that busy mode for so long? It's usually there's some reason, there's like it serves me somehow. How did it serve you?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, first and foremost, our hustle society tells us busyness is better. You think about the doctor, you can't get in to see for 8 months, but he's really good, so he must be worth the wait. Or I've got a next door neighbor who leaves at 7 a.m. in the morning and doesn't get home until 7:30 at night, but yet, we tend to think of him as a rock star because he's been promoted 3 times, and we don't necessarily think about what the price tag that busyness is costing us. We keep on thinking the gain is going to be more than the price tag, but actually it isn't. And it's not just us. I have a best friend, Paula, who she got a new job, she got a new house, a new dog, a new boyfriend, all in a short period of time. And so she had no time for me. She was too busy. And I gotta tell you, our girls' night out and our time together meant so much to me. It was like my heart was breaking because we didn't have girls' night out and she didn't give me her opinion and things like that. But I think the biggest reason, besides our hustle teaches us the society that it's good, I think the other thing that we don't realize is busyness is addictive. Every time we check a box, we get something done. We get this big hit of adrenaline that feels good. So we're like, do it again, do it again, do it again. And so we love doing it, even though we're doing low value activities. I have people who I coach who tell me that they literally, at the end of the day, will add things to their to-do list that they know they can accomplish to feel good about crossing them off. And so, it's a combination of this addiction that we have. And by the way, the American Psychiatric Association recognizes that busyness is an addiction, because an addiction is anything that keeps you from doing what you'd normally be doing. It's like an itch you just need to scratch. You almost can't help yourself. So all of those factors, I believe, lead us down a path to believe that busyness equals success.
Yeah. You know, I know that there are times when I am in that go, go, go mode that I feel like I can't stop, or that I don't want to stop because I don't want to deal with whatever emotional thing that is happening around me or that is happening inside of me. And sometimes I think there's decent reason to just set something aside and say, I'll come back to you later. I do that.
Right.
I do that intentionally sometimes. And I think that's probably healthy, but I know that there are times, I even think about COVID, and even though you wouldn't consider watching TV necessarily being busy per se, it was still doing something to keep my mind off of whatever else was going on. And so I can understand why that would feel and be like an addiction.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely is. And I know for me, when I finally came to grips with, I was a busyness addict, but I was going to find recovery because I wanted to lead a more meaningful, purposeful, productive, healthier, happier life. I started doing a lot of research on the stats about busyness, and some of them are crazy. 83% of working humans spend 1/3 of their time in meetings, with only 30% of them productive. So
Mm.
that means that we are all spending 6 to 8 hours per week in unproductive meetings. I mean, like, why can't we just stand up and say, if I don't get value or I don't give value, then I don't need to be here. And I need to talk to the person who's having the meeting and explain to them, why I don't need to be there. And I'll read their minutes or their notes. And so I think a lot of times, I developed this busy busting process because it is very intentional. It's about subtracting low value activities so that you have room for what's important. You have room for what's meaningful, And low value activities can be, you spend a couple hours in the email rabbit hole, or you decide, yeah, okay, I'm going to let interruptions in. The other day, I was working on a spreadsheet and I was so into it, and I was doing all these formulas, and I was a moving and a grooving, and I heard this like knock on my door, and it was my husband. And he basically said, "Hey, you got a minute?" And I thought to myself for a hot second, no, I really don't have a minute. It's just not a good time. But did I do that? No, I'm like, sure, I've got a minute. And he proceeded to tell me that there wasn't any ketchup in the house and we were having burgers for dinner. So I would have to eat dinner without ketchup. Like that was a big thing. But yet I go back to my Excel spreadsheet. I can't remember where I left off. I can't remember the formula I was working on. And I paid this like switching task. So there are so many low value things that we can eliminate. But speaking to the point of, the addiction, if it is addictive because of the adrenaline high, then we need to replace that adrenaline high with
Mm.
the right type of dopamine. And so I always encourage people to what I call mojo make. We tend to think that happiness is this destination, a thing. I'm going to be happy when I get the job, when I get the weekend, when I get married, when I have a baby. It's always these big steps. But actually, happiness is the micro moments, the small things that we have more control over. You know, my mother, she was very, very sick with cancer, and she knew she was terminal. And every day I would go visit her in the hospital, and she was very depressed, very sad, very despondent, wasn't eating. I mean, not that you would expect anything differently at end of life, but one day, about a week before she died, I walked into this hospital room, and all of a sudden she was like smiling and happy. And I saw that she actually ate lunch, and it was back in the day where there are boom boxes, and she was doing that little, boom box dance. And I'm like, Mom, what changed? And she said, happiness is my responsibility. So I tell people, create your own happiness rituals, 3 to 5 minutes, and they will really change your life. And they even work in the workplace. I know when I worked at United Healthcare, I introduced happiness rituals. We spent 8 minutes a day on them. We all huddled around the Zoom and did dance parties or celebrated birthdays, whatever it was. But nothing had changed in that department but the happiness rituals, and our service metrics improved 33%.
Wow. Yeah, that's really cool. So when you're talking about a happiness ritual, what makes it so? Like what when I'm thinking about, okay, well, that sounds like a great idea. I should make a happiness ritual, but where do I start or how do I find that for myself?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, they're really small things. I have a happiness ritual that I do first thing in the morning, and that is I put on a song I really like. I put on my fuzzy pink slippers, and I have a 60-second dance party. And it's just me and my slippers and my pajamas and the dance party, but it makes me feel better, and I get a hit of adrenaline. And then kind of 11 o'clock when I'm starting to get low energy, I have this happiness ritual where I eat a couple of pieces of dark chocolate and I smell them, and already the smell starts to invigorate me. And then I put them in my mouth and I close my eyes. It's only 3 minutes, but it's like pushing that reset button.
Yeah.
And the other thing, that I often do at the end of the day is I'll take a 5 minute break and love on my fur baby. Because, he makes me happy and his love is unconditional. And just, petting the back of his head and listening to him, purr with delight. It's a cat, That really makes me happy too. The fact that, he loves me and he enjoys, me petting him. So it's the small stuff, going for the walk, whatever.
Yeah, I've got we have a dog that was she's basically still a puppy, but when we got her and since then I just keep calling her the oxytocin, like this is our oxytocin hit because she's just so loving and you just want to, your voice goes up high and you're like, "Oh, I just love you, Billy. You're so sweet." But it is
I,
it's so that
I
though.
I understand it. Yeah, I mean, even like this morning, I sent my husband to the snoring room last night because he was snoring, and I'm like, "You gotta leave." And the cat went with him. And so this morning, when I got up and I looked at my cat, and I'm like, "Trader Joe, you're sleeping with your father. Why are you sleeping with your father? Why you're not sleeping with your mother?" And it's like he heard me and he came over by my legs and he wanted some cuddling. And yeah, fur babies
Yeah.
are amazing.
What about for managers or leaders of teams? You mentioned that you did this at United Healthcare. How did you incorporate that, or what kinds of things were you doing to create happiness rituals for your team?
Yeah, that's a great question. And when I worked at United Healthcare, I managed 7,500 employees across the country.
Oh
So,
my.
yeah, so I had to really think about what I could do that would work with everybody. And what we decided was that we would have 4-minute Zoom calls. The only rule was you couldn't be late for the Zoom call unless it was an emergency, and that we had to end after 4 minutes. And we just talk or laugh, tell jokes. Sometimes we'd watch Seinfeld clips. Sometimes we've had cubicle dance parties. Sometimes we sang happy birthday. One time we made cards. I sent everybody in the division some cards to color so we could send them to a nursing home. And, people got helper's high by that. And but the thing about that was 6 weeks after we started these happiness rituals, not only did I have employees knocking on my door pretty regularly saying, "Oh my God, I have more energy. I go home and I actually want to work out, or I want to spend time with my kids, or I want to make dinner." But the metrics, first call resolution, which is a challenging metric in the customer service industry, improved 33% in 6 weeks. So, it's really kind of interesting to see and look at the links between performance and that. And I have another story kind of about performance and happiness rituals. I had a friend who worked with me when I worked at Blue Cross Blue Shield, and he was the vice president of marketing for New York State. And he had a pretty hectic job, and he had a big proposal coming up, and he wasn't going to meet the deadline, and he realized it, kind of 2 days before. So he pulled his whole team on a Zoom call, and he was in Buffalo, New York. And so they started working at 4:45, and at 6 o'clock they hear this like bang, bang, bang on the door, and it's a security guard basically saying, "There's a blizzard out there. I know you're in a windowless conference room, but you can't go home for 6 hours." And Randy, my friend, he was like, "Yay, this is great. We'll get this project done." And he looks around the room and he sees that everybody is exhausted. And then he has this aha moment that his relationships with his workers are transactional. He doesn't really know them anymore. And so they spent 6 hours talking about, what they valued, what was important, what they loved about their job, what they hated about their job. And everybody went home and they said that was truly the best departmental meeting they ever had. But funny thing happened. It was in the course of, I think, 4 months. They tested employee engagement in his department, and he had always been on the bottom of the barrel. and his engagement went up 43%. So that was pretty cool because engagement doesn't go up with, go up 43%, unless you're really connecting with your people, and human connection becomes something that's important. We tend to use time management as how we decide yes or no things, but I'm really big on what I call values management and using your values for a yes or no decision. And that means at the end of your day, you're not feeling so like the cup is not full, because you're making your decisions based on your values.
Mm. My next question was literally about values, because I know that we've in your busy busting process, we already covered subtraction a little bit. We talked about mojo making, and then there's the values. Is it
Yeah,
values vibing? Is that what you call it?
I call it values vibing. I don't know. I'm
Yeah. What's that mean?
kind of creative overkill, but values vibing is about getting crystal clear on what your values are and using them as a filter, as a compass for making your decisions on yeses and nos. I used to speak a lot about values, and whenever I would ask the group, what are your values? They'd come up with two or three, and then they get lost and they couldn't kind of figure out the rest. So then they Google them or they look at their neighbor. And so I decided, you know what? I'm going to do a lot of research. I'm such a data nerd, and understand like what values give people quality of life, personally and professionally.
That's a good
And
question.
I learned that there are four very consistently, and this research was over 23,000 people, so it was pretty significant. But there are four values that really light us up in life. One of them is human connection. One of them is growth. My dad always used to say, Toots, a day without learning something new is a lost opportunity. And I'd be like, Dad, why do you always say that? And he says, when you learn, when you grow, you flex your resiliency muscle and you learn you can do hard things or
That's
things
right.
you've never done before. And then there's the third one is really about energy management, and it's about self-care, and just not putting self-care on the back burner, because it does affect your ability to focus, your energy levels. Chronic disease. There's so many things when we don't take care of ourselves, that fall to the wayside. And then the fourth value is authenticity, and authenticity kind of turning it upside down and it not being about me and what's important to me, but it being about we, and realizing that we've got two ears and one mouth for a reason. God designed us that way. And it's so we can listen more because we are better together. We do accomplish so much more when we work together and when we collaborate. And so those are the four values. For me, I keep a values vibing report card. Just write my four values down, personal energy, growth, human connection, authenticity. And I just grade myself, 1 through 5. And I take the one that's got the lowest score and I just focus on it for the next couple of days. Nothing complicated, nothing crazy, just kind of what gets measured gets improved. And so, I pay attention to that.
Hmm. I really like those. And it makes sense that those are important. And one of them that I would like to go back and touch on just a little bit that really intrigues me is energy management. So, which seems it's a different term than health than self-care. So I'm wondering, with energy management, how do you describe that, and what exactly do you measure when it comes to energy management?
Yeah, I really believe in your flow state, and I'm really lucky because I do a lot of coaching for large organizations, and one of them, I have an app that scanned my body and taught me all about flow state and diet and energy levels and mood. And it turns out that I should be eating at different patterns. My flow state is different. My creativity peaks are at different times than I thought. I was working out at all the wrong times. So managing your energy is sort of knowing who you are and what your flow state is. But it's also about kind of, we all stress in our lives. So, it's really easy to get caught in that stress mode. And I always tell people, is it a micro stress or a macro stress? Because if it's a micro stress, it's going to go away. And you shouldn't let the fact that you're stuck in traffic, or the other day my garage door broke and I had to cancel an appointment because I couldn't open the door. And, those are micro stresses. 2 weeks from now, it doesn't make a difference. And so why do we get so upset about all these micro stresses? Macro stresses, there should be an approach, but just trying to be more positive, knowing where you are in the mood elevator. Are you at a 10? Are you an 8? You can't be at a 10 all the time. But if you're at a 4 or 5, that's not good. And people can sense your low energy. It's like a bad mood is contagious, just like the flu is.
When you're talking about stress, it made me think about how I can get when I feel overwhelmed. And that's usually because I'm feeling some sort of pressure to do something, whether that be self-inflicted pressure or pressure, expectations of others. And when I feel that, and then the garage door doesn't open, and then I can't find my keys, and then, like those micro stresses that I should be able to just let go of, they drive me insane. So I'm wondering, how do you get out of that place in your head where, you're feeling that kind of pressure and these little things that shouldn't be adding up or adding up? How do you get out of that?
Yeah. And that's a great question. I'm really glad you asked me that, because quite honestly, there's so much micro stress in the world right now. It's just everywhere. There's no escaping it. And we're human, so it gets to us. And a lot of times we get to a boiling point, and really the way around it is to recognize, like, just to take a step back and to take a breath and to just walk away from everything for at least 3 minutes, whether it's a walk, whether it's just, sitting down on a chair or whatever. Just walk away from it and do something that ignites, a better mood or helps you with your stress. I exercise a lot. After I exercise, sometimes I exercise in the morning, and sometimes I wake up and I'm all stressed out about everything I need to do. And then I go exercise, and then I'm like, it's doable, Peggy. It's totally doable. And so, exercise is another way that we can really become more positive. But the reality is, we control those voices in our head. And sometimes they can drive us mad, and we just can't help but listen to them. But we should know that those voices in our head many times are not reality. They're just voices, they're just thoughts, they're not real. And, I think you just need to be smart about it, and smart about it because it's better for you, when we give into stress. We have chronic disease, heart disease, depression, just so much goes on when we have too much stress in our lives. So we've got to figure out how to filter it. And for me, it's like, is it a micro or a macro? And literally, if it's a micro stress, I will write it down on a Post-it note. I will look at it and I will crumple it in a ball and I will throw it on the floor. And I will physically say to myself, I am not going to let this micro stress ruin my day.
What's the difference between being busy and being like focusing on productivity? Like, why are they not compatible, or how do you see those two things?
Well, they actually can be busy. Busy can be productive. It's not, when you're busy, you're not productive, but it's really the idea of focusing and spending your time on what matters. And when you do that, you get further ahead. When you don't spend a ton of time on low value activities, you get through your day faster and you have a sense of accomplishment. And there have been so many studies and so much data. And I produced this report, the Busyness report, workplace report that I produce every year and have thousands of people that participate in it. And it goes through, what is the price tag we pay for busyness? One stat sticks with me, and that is 64% of the working population doesn't have time to get their important work done because they overschedule themselves. Now, I don't know about you, but while I have somebody helping schedule for me, I control my schedule. If I'm not blocking out time to actually do my work, shame on me.
Sure.
There's always, I am such a believer that you can always find a way. You can always figure it out. You just need to have an intelligent conversation with yourself. And I think that's why I am so passionate about helping people go beyond busy, because the reality is you can achieve more by actually doing less. And I've got the data to prove it, lots of it.
Yeah, sounds like it. Okay, so if somebody's wanting to implement your process into their life or their team, what do you suggest as, maybe first of all, it's buying your book, maybe it's going through that with people, but what is the process for actually making a meaningful change in this area?
Yeah, I call it the busy busting framework. And, step one is subtracting low value activities. And I got something on my website called the Busy Barometer. People can take it for free. And what it does is it evaluates how you spend your time and what low value activities you're doing, and makes recommendations on how to eliminate them. So you subtract so that your schedule is clean. You ignite the superpowers of mojo making, of happiness, the neurology about it, what it actually does to us, and that's by having happiness rituals you can actually control, just little 3-4 minute things that you do multiple times a day, and I hard code them right into my schedule. And then the third thing is, you control your schedule, you control your values, make yes or no decisions based on, does that align with my values? Does it align with my purpose? And if the answer is no, then why are you doing it?
I would imagine that you've probably had some mentors in your life. When you think about the mentors that have really impacted you the most, is there anything that they did that kind of stuck with you as like, yeah, I want to do this too for people?
Yeah, I'm a giving person, and one of my first jobs was for a really large international company, and my boss had this idea because it was pretty much a manufacturing job, and he wanted to reward people for doing the right thing, and he wanted to start this thing where we rewarded people for doing the right thing, and he wanted to launch it with all the employees, and then he wanted to give prizes and have a competition, and a monthly dinner for the people that actually did this. And so I had started that job, and he asked me to get this program up and running, and I knew it was super, super important to him. So I worked really hard to figure out how I could launch what should have taken 3 months in a couple of weeks, and I did it. And I came back to my office one day, and there was a thank you note, like a personal thank you note, that basically said, you know, you're great. And also, by the way, there was a big check in it too. And so it was like he was encouraging really good behavior and he was rewarding me for good behavior. And so yeah, Dick Sager, he was a really amazing leader. He would walk into a room and people would light up.
Oh, sounds like it. Sounds like he was pretty great. Peggy, I've got one more question at the end, but like, how can people connect with you and find your book and all the things that you want them to know about you?
Yeah, they can go to my website, peggysullivanspeaker.com. They can go to my LinkedIn site, Peggy Sullivan Speaker. Or they can also just reach out to me via email. And honestly, I love meeting new people. I love helping them, with their busyness. So, I can give you my email and you can, post it in the podcast. But those are all great ways. I've got a QR code that links to a newsletter that just gives, quick tips on a weekly basis. And so there are lots of ways that they can engage with me and just learn how and why busyness isn't better, but more importantly, what actions can they take that they have control over, that they can, get out of this hamster wheel that so many of us are stuck on.
One last question. If you could offer one challenge to someone who wants to help shape the future, what would it be?
Okay. I would I just think giving and adding value for people, we just don't do it enough. We got into this survival mode during COVID, like what's in it for me and how do I survive? And I think we have gotten away from giving and caring and adding values for others. And there's a helper's high that comes with that. And so, short little story. I was at the grocery store about 2 weeks ago, and there was a older woman, and I was in a rush. I had to get a couple of things, and she was really struggling to try to get one of the carts away from the other carts. And then as she started to walk, you could tell she wasn't very sure-footed. So I asked her if I could help her. And I did the cart, and I literally spent 45 minutes grocery shopping, helping her shop. And then we got to the line to pay, and she pulled out some food stamps and she pulled out some tokens and a couple of $1 bills. And she's like, well, check these out first. And so I decided, what the heck? I'm going to treat her to groceries. Like, that is such a good way for me to spend my money helping somebody else. And I felt so proud of myself and so good for such a long period of time. And her family and her friends from all over the world, because her family wasn't local, they called me. They reached out to me because I gave
Oh,
her my business card and I say, you get in trouble, you call me. And to this day, even though it's a recent relationship, she gives me a buzz and tells me what's going on in her life, and it's amazing.
oh, that's really sweet. Well, Peggy, it's been great to visit with you and hear your story and your message about busyness and joy and celebrating these what did you call them at the beginning? What were you calling them? Those moments of celebration, but you called them something different.
Happiness rituals,
Yes, the
mojo
happiness
making.
rituals. Yes, those were great. Appreciate what you're doing in the world. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean it's really all about giving you the tools so you can optimize and become your best self. I mean, truly, that's what it's about. And once we learn to eliminate things that don't add value and figure out that happiness is not a destination and kind of what's important and this is where we should be spending our time, it's very actionable.
Mm. Well, thanks for being here.
You're welcome.